kind of a chase where they hit another car head on, or there was cocaine and guns and bullets and people scattering everywhere. And then it turned into a foot chase, and ultimately it turned into a trial for murder, where I was at one moment the undercover person working in character and in role as I was trained to do. It turned into the law enforcement officer handcuffing people, picking them up off the ground, and then ultimately testifying in trial on a homicide case.
Hello, Tom Levecki here with the latest edition of the New Theory podcast. Now, if you've been watching the podcast, you see I'm only doing it in studio. I don't really have many exceptions, but for this next guest, I had to make it and do it remote. His name is Dutch Mcalpin.
Yeah, that's right. You said it right.
Perfect, Dutch Mcalpin, and he's with the Mob Museum. He's a former organized crime law enforcement. Just literally did undercover work, whether it was started out Midwest, I believe. Beat cop, did undercover task work for multiple agencies, infiltrated motorcycle gangs, worked on terrorism, weapon trafficking, cartels, trafficking rings, and even touched on a mafia case, which you guys are probably familiar with. Dutch Mcalpin, welcome to New Theory Podcast. How you doing today?
Thanks, Tom. I'm doing good. I appreciate you having me on.
All right. So when I saw you were a biker, or not a biker, but I saw you had a long beard, which gave me the biker vibe, respectfully. We got to give a shout out to our man, Giovanni Rocco and Giovanni Ring. They have a podcast that they launched along with the Mob Museum called In the Life. We'll get that into the moment. So, Dutch, let's give us a little background about yourself and give us where you grew up and a little about kind of what made you.
Yeah, I mean, probably what made me is the experiences I had in life, and I'm thankful. They've all been humbling and great. Based on the work that I did in my undercover capacity, I don't think anyone would expect that I grew up in a small town in Iowa.
Yeah.
My dad and my mother were both blue-collar people. They worked in factories. They worked overnight shifts. I don't like to use the word poor, but we didn't have a lot, but no one at that time had a lot.
Yeah.
So, we grew up in bunk beds. We grew up eating goulash and, tater tot casserole, like many people at the time can relate to. Early in life, my dad lost his job. We moved to a bigger metropolitan area. It was far out of anybody in my family's comfort zone. We moved to a place just outside of Detroit, Michigan called Ypsilanti.
Yeah.
We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment. Me and my brother slept in bunk beds in a room. 2 of my dad's buddies slept in bunk beds in the same room. Wow. My aunt slept on a couch. My sister slept on a floor. And it was a kind of a chaotic area that we lived in. It was called Camelot Apartments. And I'm not complaining about that. I'm not downgrading that at all. It was just a different experience. But when I saw police coming into those neighborhoods at the time, they kind of controlled the chaos and they kind of brought the level down. At that time, it was a positive thing. It wasn't, we didn't have such a bad image of law enforcement at the time. And, today's image is sadly not what it used to be. But at that time, I admired it and I thought they were the peacemakers. And that's kind of when I got my, my drive, my interest in law enforcement.
Okay. So you bring like so many good points to unpack. I mean, just for example, even like nowadays, you would never, and hopefully, you're not stuck with having to have multiple people in your house. You would never have nowadays an adult sitting in the same room as a child. Like, I was actually just at his restaurant. I have a cousin who grew up with, they had 11 kids. He was one of 11, and they lived in like a 3-bedroom apartment in Linden, New Jersey. Now he's really successful and so forth. So we all like kind of come from beginnings that are extremely humble, and it kind of helps us, helps mold on who we are. I'm excited because I knew you knew Giovanni, obviously, but I didn't know you worked on his case, and that's how I can't wait to get to. But I'm going to be patient.
Yeah,
he helped take down a big guy in the Jersey mob. We'll get that in a second. Give us your first kind of. You started out as a beat cop, and then you kind of graduated to more serious stuff.
Yeah, so I actually went to the military. I went to the National Guard between my junior year and senior year of high school. I went to Fort Benning, Georgia. I got my basic training out of the way, finished my training there as well. Which the only reason I did that is I thought it might help me have a better resume, kind of pad my resume, getting in law enforcement. I started a little bit of college on the GI Bill, and I started working in a jail. Super long story short, because of circumstances, I took a test, and the elected sheriff at the time, lost several personnel in the same short period of time, and I had happened to pass the test and became a qualified candidate.
Nice.
So basically, he called the Iowa Law Enforcement Academy. Said, "I got this kid. He's 19. He's not old enough, but we want to send him to the police academy." They said, "Well, he can't own a gun and he can't buy ammunition, but the sheriff's office can own the gun and buy the ammunition." So
there you go.
Crazily, they sent me to the police academy, and I graduated, and I became a deputy sheriff in a Midwest community in a small rural area. And that's kind of where I got my roots, working the highways and the rural areas in the 90s of meth labs and methamphetamine running rampant. My aunt actually passed away in her 30s of a methamphetamine overdose. Other members of my family went to prison over drug use and methamphetamine use specifically. So I had a little bit of passion to be involved in that. You know what I'm saying?
All right, a quick technical glitch. All right, so how did you go from like kind of a small town beat cop to give us your first breakout assignment where you went like undercover, deep cover?
Yeah.
Within some of the most dangerous criminal organizations in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I worked as a deputy sheriff in a rural area for several years, and I'll get into like how I got to do the deep cover stuff and the more interesting stuff. But I think it's important to talk about growing up in my career the way I did. I worked by myself, and so you had to learn how to talk your way in and out of trouble. You stop a car on a highway at 2:00 in the morning in the middle of nowhere by yourself, and four dudes fresh out of prison get out of the car, and they're cooking dope. Yeah. You ain't fighting it and shooting out with them. So you better learn how to articulate yourself and talk yourself into and out of that scenario, which actually really, really helped me. Working in a jail, same thing. You don't run the jail runs the jail. There's, way more people than you. So you learn how to, you pick up street lingo, you pick up the mannerisms, the characteristics, and you take that with you. So I ended up moving on to a much larger department in the Midwest as well, working on a metro, and I work on a metro narcotics task force, which was basically buying street level narcotics, doing street level gang stuff. But I got pretty heavily involved in the Hispanic community, and I was starting to buy large amounts of methamphetamine. And I got approached by a federal agency who said, "Hey, do you realize who you're dealing with here? We have an interest in this not only nationally or even regionally, but globally, and we'd like you to do some stuff for us." So they picked me up and they put me through a specialized program. They put me through some specialized training and put me on their undercover list, we'll call it. And that case that I was working at the time turned into a massive, nationwide with a Mexican cartel group that was trafficking methamphetamine.
So obviously your first assignment dealing with, one of the Mexican cartels, can you maybe give us a story where the scariest moment or precarious situation or something where that you want to share with the viewers?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to pitch our podcast a little bit here on the episode called Meet Dutch.
You need to check out Inside the Life, him and Giovanni Rocco, Mob Museum, and check it out. And I didn't mean not to plug it enough, but I want to plug it, endorse it. The guests are insane. We'll get to that in a second. But I just want people to kind of get the arc of some of your stories, and then we'll roll into the pod.
Okay, cool. Another reason I wanted to mention that is I go into detail there. We're trying to cram in a lifetime of career moves here, and here's like the scariest one. Well, man, I'm telling you, like there was a lot of times I was in fear. It's the loss of control, the elements around you, the scenario's never as you thought it was or never as you planned. So I was definitely fearful more than once, but probably one of the more violent encounters happened with the very beginning when I was dealing with these guys in a car dealership, and I had been probably going in and out of this dealership multiple times a week over the course of a year or more. I had made good connections with multiple members of a cartel group. And a long story short, while we were doing a deal one day, a shootout took place. Our government source, who I'd been working with for over that length of time, was shot and killed. The guys that were there took off and jumped in a car and were shooting at the building. You could see the dust bouncing off the bricks and the guys loading up in the cars, and it turned into kind of a chase where they hit another car head on, or there was cocaine and guns and bullets and people scattering everywhere. And then it turned into a foot chase, and ultimately it turned into a trial for murder, where I was at one moment the undercover person working in character and in role as I was trained to do. It turned into the law enforcement officer handcuffing people, picking them up off the ground, and then ultimately testifying in trial on a homicide case. So that one was pretty intensive. And, there's a lot of story between the beginning of that and the end of that, but that's definitely one of the scariest ones.
Well, we're not gonna give too much away, Dutch. I promise. Like I said, check out Inside the Life. So let me ask you, when you're undercover like that, and it's deep cover and it's a long game, and you go to some really serious people, but there is like a shootout or somebody does die or something happens. Is there a protocol? Is there gut? Like, when do I say, wait a second, this is really bad and I got to preserve the case? Or automatically a crime is being committed, you need to be the law enforcement guy. So give us what's like protocol, and then what did you do?
Well, I guess the best answer, the short answer to that is, you're an undercover officer second.
Yeah.
You're a sworn law enforcement officer first. And you do have an oath to maintain, and, serve and protect. Protect is the number one. And so when it turns into murder, there's no undercover case left.
Yeah.
When someone's killed, the case is over. You've got to preserve all the evidence you can and shut this thing down. Also, crimes happen while you're working undercover. Dealing dope's one thing, and doing certain kind of crimes is one thing, but crimes against persons, rape, murder, acts of violence and stuff, you can't just walk away from them and look them over. So, basically, if something really violent happens, and you're the only one, you got to come out of role. You got to do what you got to do. And that's not always easy to do. And it's also not a safe way to do things. I mean, I can't just pull a gun out and be like, freeze. Yeah. They've been buying dope with me. I've been doing dirt with them. Like, we've been working the street. They know me as a bad guy. They might think I'm robbing them. They might think that I'm part of a hit crew or something. So it's a really, really imperfect scenario. It's the last thing you could hope to happen. Generally, when you're working undercover, you have a react team. You have some guys that are kitted up wearing, appropriate raid vests and appropriate police markings, looking professional and sharp and easily identified. And so normally, if something happens, you're going to probably give some kind of a indication to your react team, your S team, and say, hey, something's gone wrong here. And they're going to come in and make the arrest. But on this particular day, there were so many people involved and so many things happening. I had to come out of role and go from undercover into, enforcement. I just happened to have a kit in the back of my truck because I was actually doing some surveillance. I had a gun with me, and I was able to come out of role and go into enforcement, but that's not ideally, and that's not normally what we would do.
Okay. So you probably talk about this on the show, and we'll get to the guests in a minute, because there's pretty cool guests on the show as well, some of which I interviewed as well. I guess my question to you is in regards to motorcycle gangs, because you had some experience there too. That's like a tough nut to crack. What's the strategy to initiate and to put a plan together successfully to infiltrate a tight-knit group like a motorcycle gang? How does that happen?
That's a very good perception and a very good question. The mafia, organized motorcycle clubs, they're different than street gangs. They're less approachable. For one, they've been infiltrated multiple times. They've had wiretaps done on them. They've had undercovers do cases against them. And I don't think that there's like a book on like how do you start an undercover case, with an outlaw club, a motorcycle club. They're not exactly the kind of guys you just walk up to and be like, hey, I want to ride with you guys and hang out with you guys.
Yeah.
Also, in fairness to clubs and organizations, I don't necessarily want to say every single one of them is committing a crime.
Yeah.
And so I think what happens is a motorcycle club or an organization has people in there that have been pre-predicated by a case team. And the case team says, hey, we know Tom has been trafficking cocaine and heroin in the Philadelphia area. He's part of this club.
Yeah.
Or this organization. And so you've got the undercover, they give you the predication, which basically means elements of a crime have been met. We're able to substantiate that this person is committing these crimes. And the undercover's got to come up with the scenario of how he's going to approach them or be involved with them.
Yeah.
But I will say a lot of times, as much as these organizations hate to admit it, there's a source. Yeah. There's somebody already in the group that's got themselves caught up in a particular predicament that they want to get out of, and they're willing to introduce somebody or at least introduce the idea of somebody. So you may be introduced. With the motorcycle club, I think the worst thing, even though, like you said, I got a beard, I look like a bike guy. I mean, I grew up riding motorcycles. I grew up in that lifestyle. That's genuinely me. That's just who I am. What I want to say is, as far as the undercover approach to an outlaw motorcycle club, just like with the mafia, I would not approach the mafia as a mafia member. They wouldn't allow that. They wouldn't consider that. They wouldn't think that. So just like any other organization, you've got to find where you fit into that. Maybe they need something you have that they can't get from somebody else. Sometimes the worst thing to give somebody is the thing they know the most. If you're going into a motorcycle club, probably the worst thing to give them is another motorcycle club member. Like, why not give them, my partner Giovanni, the Italian guy from the East Coast who they've never met. He might be the guy that they would connect with better, So really, you got to use your imagination. You got to do your intelligence background before you ever say hello to anyone, before you make a phone call, before you step foot in there.
Yeah.
You want to know who they are and what they're up to, and then kind of come up with something that works.
So I have one more question before we talk about some cool things about Inside the Life. My question is, and this relates to Giovanni's ring. You were involved in that case, I believe with Charlie Stango. So my family, when they moved from Italy, I grew up in and around Lisbon, New Jersey. My family lived there when they came from Italy. I know a lot of people in the book. So when I had Giovanni on, I got a lot of pushback, a lot of phone calls. People reach out to me, and even one person who came on who actually tried to debunk on a lot of the stuff that Giovanni said. Now, I believe Giovanni did in good faith. Obviously, he was working on behalf of the FBI. I think everything was true. My only question to you is about that case that's lingering. Charlie Stango allegedly, right, if everything's true,
Right.
in his role, portrayed by the FBI, was a very powerful captain and knew a lot of people. Again, I know a lot of the people that he knows are very serious people. Why would he go to an associate and say, hey, give me some biker guys to make this happen? That's my only question about that case that's lingering with me. And obviously you're working on it. So give me your take on
it. Well, I don't think a guy like Beeps or Charlie would go to an associate and ask him to do something that serious. I agree. But also, that's not what I understand happened. I believe Giovanni and I called him Beeps. I'm sorry, but it's Charlie.
Yeah.
Charlie and Giovanni were already doing things together. Giovanni was running a crew and paying up to Charlie.
Yeah.
And, I think Charlie trusted him very much.
Yeah.
And he said, hey, I got a guy, but he's a made guy, and I want to get rid of him, basically saying he wants to kill him.
Yeah.
And I think Giovanni said something like, well, if you ain't got the permission and we do this, aren't we going to start a war? Aren't we going to start trouble?
Yeah.
Why don't I get my guy Dutch to do it? Our hands are clean. He looks the part, he fits the part, he'll do it. That would make more sense to me, than just hey, I kind of know this guy. I'll see if he'll kill a couple people for me. You know what I mean?
Ah, that's interesting. I never thought of it that way. Now, when you Donnie Brasco, yourself, Giovanni, what's his name? Oh God, I'm drawing a blank. The guy who did the Gambinos, and I just talked a few weeks ago. So Garcia, Jack Garcia. So like you guys do some really cool and scary things, but what mistakes do the mob guys make? Is it did they trust you too quick, or did they get greedy? In your experience specifically, what do the mob guys make? And have you seen in your experience in terms of mistakes?
Well, I would say, what mistakes did the mob make? It's like, what mistake does any criminal organization make?
Yeah.
And really, I got to be honest, I don't understand why they would do the things they do. I don't understand why they would trust people they barely know. Like, sometimes people accuse us of being snitches, and I'm like, we're not snitches, man. Snitches grow up with the same people. They commit crimes to these people, and then they get caught, and they want a deal, or they want out of something, or they have a revelation of their life that they want to change it, and they provide information.
Yeah.
We're not snitches. We're cops.
Correct.
And we're working. Somebody else brings us to them, and they buy into us. I don't know why they buy into us. I'd like to say because I'm a cool dude, but realistically, they just haven't done their due diligence. And I think people tend to believe what they want to believe. Like, I need something done, and these guys are going to do it,
All right. So tell us a little about Inside the Life, and tell us about some of the guests. And I'm really excited to hear about it.
Yeah, Inside the Life is hosted by the Mob Museum in Las Vegas. And the mission of Mob Museum is to advance the public understanding of organized crime's history and impact on American society. And it's the Mob and Law Enforcement Museum. So they want to tell that relationship from a truthful point and a genuine point of what's the relationship between law enforcement and organized crime. And I think it's kind of like Tom and Jerry, or like Batman and the Joker. Like, we need each other, one doesn't really exist without the other. So the podcast, we interview a lot of old undercover agents that maybe have come out of Inside the Life and are willing and openly able to talk about what they did. We also interview former organized crime people who have come out, maybe even turned informant, or just willing to talk about their involvement with these things. And it's just a really cool platform. I like to think that everything that we say is true and genuine as we know it to be. And, like you said, somebody accuses somebody of that wasn't true or that wouldn't happen. But I'm telling you firsthand, if Giovanni and I are telling you it happened, we witnessed it happen. We were there. We recorded it. We saw it. It's on audio. It's on video, and it's written down on. You can look up.
Well, either way, Inside the Life. Like I said, hopefully at some point we'll get to connect. I've been meaning to get together with Giovanni anyway. I'm really excited about the show. I'm really excited for you. How can people find the show, Dutch?
Anywhere that you find your podcast. You can find it on YouTube, Apple, Spotify. InsideTheLife.org is a website. You can look on there. We also have Inside the Life Pod on Instagram and Facebook. Nice. So you can definitely find it.
Nice. I'm particularly excited about the Frank Panessa interview. He doesn't do a lot of interviews. I actually never got him on. I want to get him on. And I'm just really interested about how he infiltrated the Sicilian Cosa Nostra and eventually American Cosa Nostra. And those guys were tough nut to crack too. And then you got the guys out of Philly, which eventually got the guys out of New York. And that pizza connection case fascinates me. There's children that were involved. There was one guy here in New Jersey that was associated with decavs that was also involved. But Dutch, this was fun. Sorry about some of the technical difficulties, but Inside the Life, Dutch Mcalpin, Giovanni Rocco. Shout out Giovanni. Hopefully you'll see this. And if you haven't got it, get Giovanni's ring. And Dutch, I'll see you next time. And congratulations on the show.
Thank you, Tom.